Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Yapyat Sarvam Trailokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Vidyanaravinam Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So we are in our second chapter. What verse are we on?
We're on number 30 for tonight.
Number 30 in the second chapter. Do you all have a book who wants one?
Yep.
Will you help us out, please, Deepa?
Dehi nityamavadhyoyam Dehe sarvasya bharata Tasmat sarvani bhutani Natvam shochitumarhasi. This, the indweller in the body of everyone, is ever indestructible, O Bharata, and therefore you should not grieve for any creature.
So again, we have to be aware of the three levels that Krishna is teaching on in this chapter. And this is discerned by context. Dharma Shastra, he will teach at the level of the body. He said these bodies have a beginning and an end. You know, why grieve over the inevitable? He teaches at the level of the subtle body, what we call the transmigrating soul. That feeling of being an individual. It's a composite. It's composed of the five organs of action: hands, feet, tongue, anus, and genitals. Five organs of knowledge: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. The prana at a subtle form. Manas, mind. Buddhi, intellect. Chitta, the stuff of the mind wherein we have memory, also is the focusing power. You could look at this and then you could look at that. Ahankriti, the ego sense. Some scriptures include the vasanas in this. Other scriptures call that the kara in the Shastra, causal body. But for this scripture, we can say it includes the vasanas. That's what moves from physical body to physical body in the Hindu doctrine of reincarnation. Listen very carefully. This is not the self. It is a body, just like the physical body, just a subtle one. At best, it has a relative immortality. But it is not the self. The subtle body is inherently insentient. It is jada. It has a reflection of consciousness, what we call chidabhasa. And I want to do my little teaching aid here. You've seen me do this before. So we have a mirror here. There is no luminosity, no light in the mirror. But is there a light in the mirror? Focus it at the Zoom text. Is there? Yes or no?
It's reflected off of it.
It is Prakash Chaya, the reflection of light. There's a real light, but it's the nature of the mirror to reflect it. So is the nature of the subtle body. Technically, it happens in the intellect, in the Vijnanamaya kosha. So I get the sense that I, Jim, or I, Deepa, Anna, or who are you, Daniel, have an individual experience. I'll get that later. Experience of illuminating things. I went to the symphony today. You didn't go to the symphony today. You went lawn bowling. I didn't go lawn bowling. I don't know what you did. So we have this individual experience of the triputi, the triple factor, knower, knowing, and known. This happens essentially in the subtle body. We locate it in the subtle body because it takes place in the dream as well. And then it functions through the physical body in the waking state. The physical body has holes in it, basically. We call them golaya. In this country on Halloween, I assume they do this in Germany. Do people dress up and wear costumes on Halloween?
A little bit.
Yeah. So if I have a Donald Trump mask, I have the mask. Oh, you look like Donald Trump. I can see out of the mask. I can stick my tongue out of the mouth. But I take the mask off. The mask does not see. The mask has no tongue. It's just holes. This physical body is like a mask. It only appears to have sense perception when the subtle body is functioning through it. But just as the mirror itself has no capacity to illumine, I turn off the lights, the mirror can't do anything but reflect the darkness. That's like deep sleep. But you are consciousness itself. And now we have a list of qualities that point to the self. They do not define. So let's parse this one, going through one idea at a time. First idea.
This, the indweller in the body of everyone, is ever indestructible.
Yes. Physical harm gets to my body, physical body. Emotional upset gets to my mind. Doubt and confusion gets to my intellect. My ego sense can be violated. I can have low self-esteem. But the self in me is completely untouched. Any time, in any circumstance, if I think, thin out the mind a bit, introvert the attentive faculty, and notice that feeling of being a person falls. And what's there? Chid Akasha, as Yoga Vasishtha says, the space of consciousness itself, which never changes, is never harmed. You are always safe. Now, we can have indirect knowledge. I can read this in the scripture, and oh, that's so comforting. That's helpful. But we have to have aparoksha jnana, direct experience, over and over and over again. Introvert the attentive faculty, notice the knower, and see if you change. Deepa, were you a little gray ball with wings today?
Not yet.
Some pink angel in there? If you bother to look, what's there? The space. Yet that space shines as awareness. Good times and bad. Nothing touches you. Next idea.
O Bharata, and therefore you should not grieve for any creature.
So there was that was the only idea. The indestructible.
Yeah.
Okay. So back to verse 11, which is such hard teaching, where Krishna says, "You grieve for whom you should not grieve, though you speak words of wisdom. The wise grieve neither for the living nor the dead." So you see the room from your viewpoint, I see it from mine. You are aware of your body. Your body is an object of cognition. I'm aware of my body. You are aware of your thoughts and feelings. I am aware of my thoughts and feelings. But when you look behind your eyes and notice the knower, all that's there is the space of consciousness. And when I look behind my eyes and notice the knower, all that's there is the space of consciousness. So if you've had a friend or a relative that's died, first of all, certain is death for the born, certain is birth for the dead. Why grieve over the inevitable at the level of the body? As a person casts off worn out garments, so this transmigrating soul, this embodied soul, subtle body, casts off bodies and takes up new ones. Why should we grieve? Then he's saying, and the truth is, you go nowhere, and nobody else does either. Now, at this point, it may be just philosophy for us. Now, what do? Abhyasa Vairagya Ch2. Practice mature renunciation, which thins the mind so that this truth becomes our direct experience. Now, let's talk a little bit about, do we reincarnate? When you dream, you have the experience of, I'm in a dream body, which is what I call a locus of perception, meaning I peep out of that dream body at the dream world. And I have a dream ego, meaning I think that that's me. And then I look out at the people, places, things, and conditions, and I have reactions, thoughts, and feelings to them, positive or negative. But when I wake up, was I in the dream, or was the dream in me? Here I am in bed. In the morning I wake up. Oh, what a weird dream that was. Was I ever really in the dream? No. What the Vedanta thunders. You are not in the body. The body is in you. Yes, there is space in the glass. Well, is there space in the glass, or is the glass in space? I can call it glass space. If I move the glass, does space move? No. The space is kutastha, still and immovable. So is yourself. Indestructible. You're safe. Always. Next verse.
Swadharmamapi cha viksha navikampitumarhasi dharmyati yuddha shreyo anyatta kshatriyasya na vidyate. Further, looking at thine own duty, thou ought not to waver, for there is nothing higher for a Kshatriya than a righteous war.
So, many people think, well, this is Hinduism advocating violence and war. Let's not look at it from that level. The term that Vyasa, our poet, uses is swadharma. Swa means self. Dharma is the essence of a thing without which it would not be the thing that it is. It's nature. So the term swadharma has an exoteric understanding and an esoteric understanding. The exoteric understanding here means to what varna, to what caste do you belong? Are you an intellectual? Are you a scholar? Do you have an interest in philosophy and religion? That means you've got Brahmin, Swadharma. Are you a warrior? Does injustice just drive you up a wall? Are you a fighter for truth and justice, for righteousness? Kshatriya, warrior caste. Are you a person who's involved in the production and distribution of goods and services? Absolutely essential to the society. Do you make stuff? Or do you move stuff from person to person? And you are a Vaishya. Or are you a person who likes to work with their hands, a tradesperson, carpenter, an electrician, a cabinet maker? I'm just thinking about when I was in Portugal in 1998. And just the most gorgeous tiles in Portugal. Anybody seen those? So I guess they have them in Spain too. But it's not only being the craftsperson who, tiles a wall, but the people who make them. They're artists too. So these are the four varnas, the four castes. Now, later on, Krishna is going to say, I am the author of the fourfold caste, according to guna and karma. Guna, qualities of mind; karma, the actions that we do. Please note, it does not say janma. What is janma?
Birth.
Birth. Gita does not say you are born into a caste. So you may have Brahmin parents and have been raised doing ritual and get the sacred thread. But if you go out into the world and you're involved in buying and selling and making money, you're a merchant. Likewise, you may be born in a humble fishing village and yet have this enormous love for God. Like Amaji, you become a great saint. Your guna and your karma. This is radical. Even though she was born in a humble fishing village. So we also have to understand this. Now, the esoteric understanding. I like to use a snowflake as an example. All snowflakes are nothing but crystallized water. But science tells us that each snowflake is unique. So you have a unique collection, combination of qualities of mind and actions impelled by the past. So here what Krishna is saying is, I love the way Joseph Campbell explained it, follow your bliss. Ride the horse in the direction it's going. You don't have to push the river downstream. When we align our actions with this deep, unique quality, yours with Dharma, then life is a whole lot easier. It's not the answer to all the problems of existence. But if you try to be something that's against your nature, life becomes a struggle. Now, back when I was a musician, I was working at Cal State Hayward. I was teaching voice. One of the questions I would frequently ask the young singers, do you want to be a musician or do you want to be a celebrity? They are not the same thing. Oh, I want to be a famous opera singer. No guarantee. But what you can do is be a working musician. Now, later on, Krishna's going to say, thy right is to work alone, never to its fruits. We're starting to get into the teaching on karma yoga. All we get in life is work. Fruits. So you better enjoy what you're doing, because that's all you're going to get out of it. The person who works contrary to their nature because they want prestige, or they think it's safe, or the waggy finger of superego, this is what my parents say I should do, or my society, or my gender. That's a burdensome life. You'll always be fighting something. Now, it's much easier to take the risk to start to live our lives according to our swadharma when we're young. The older we get, the harder it is. If we've been working, acting contrary to our swadharma. I like to tell the example of a dear friend of mine. And he wanted, his parents owned a bar. He didn't want to do that. But he had a fine mind and he studied finance. Never got his CPA. It just didn't happen for him. Can't remember whether he took the tests or not. But anyway, he worked in finance, hated it. It was soul crushing, and he didn't do it very well. What he loved was theater and music. But he was frightened to do that. Until he retired. And it's really hard to study to become an actor when you're in your late 60s or 70s. You can do it. But when you have a hard time being able to memorize a script, very different than when you do it when you're 25. So it was a life that was largely disappointing for him. It's not a rehearsal. This is it. This is your life. And you have a spiritual right to do what you love. Now, here's another interesting point. Let's say you're a bookkeeper and you hate it. What you'd really rather be is a teacher, which teachers don't make enough money. So, what's happening from the standpoint of the society? You're in the bookkeeper slot, and there's a slot for you in the universe because God never wastes anything that you're supposed to be in, and you're not fulfilling that job. And there's somebody else who just loves to do bookkeeping, who can't do that job because you're in their slot. So society becomes disordered from a spiritual standpoint. Do you see that? Follow your bliss. And for Arjuna, I'm going to go home and meditate so that we don't want to get in this whole war, blah, 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 blah. And Krishna says, you're Kshatriya. There is nothing more glorious for a warrior than a righteous war. Follow your bliss. Practically speaking, people get ideas about the spiritual life. Well, I have to be a celibate. And that's not your swadharma. Then you're going to spend all your time thinking about the sex you're not having, not about God. Maybe your swadharma is to be a grihastha, a householder. It's okay. I always think of Nisargadatta Maharaj, deeply enlightened man. And he talks about having had a spiritual idea. He was a family man, ran a beedi store, cigarette store in Mumbai. He left his family, went up to the Himalayas. But then he saw, no, that's not where the Lord wants me. That's not my swadharma. Came back to Mumbai, had his beedi store, and did satsang in the apartment above it. Any thoughts about this? Now, as I've taught this notion to some people, I've mistakenly given people the idea that, if I just find the right job, then I'll be happy. There's more to being happy than having the right job. But if you're acting against your swadharma, it just makes your life a lot harder. Did I hear a question over here? No. Just taking a breath. Okay, any other thoughts or questions about this notion?
Is there any advice you'd give to someone who, I think I've asked you this like almost every 4 months or something. What if you know you're acting against your swadharma, but you don't know what your swadharma is?
You start by paying attention to what you enjoy doing, not having or being, but doing. I remember working with one student and they had operated from super ego, shoulda, woulda, coulda, for so long. And I asked him, well, when was the last time you really did something you enjoyed? And he thought for a moment. He says, well, in kindergarten, I used to like to finger paint. Oh, sad. That was the last time he acted from that place of joy. Work is the highest form of play. Play is the highest form of work. But you have to work at it. Now, it's perfectly okay if because of fear, you stay in a job that you're alienated from. But it will probably be stressful. And if you work at a job where there's alienation, then what you actually end up doing is accruing the money so you can fulfill your animal needs. I want my cave like a bear or a dog. I want to eat. I want to fornicate. And then I want to vacate, go on a vacation. That's the weirdest word in the world in the English language. Vacate, like leave. Empathetically, I can remember, for example, when I was doing my music job at St. Augustine, and it would be Easter or Christmas, and I got to spend a whole bunch of money and have a full orchestra, hire extra singers and stuff like that. And I walk home and I go, I can't believe they paid me to do this. It was so much fun. Now, interesting things. So my accompanist that I have, Irene, every once in a while I'd see her back there in the music office and she would be filing music. Irene, we don't pay you to file music. Let some of the volunteer choir members do this. Just, oh no, I like to file. It relaxes me. In my mind, I can't think of anything more boring. She liked it. Swadharma again. They all are made differently. But for those of us who aren't kids, and we feel like we're doing alienated labor, what we need to do is start to do the things we enjoy. Now, I'm going to go take a cruise. What I really want to do for the rest of my life is lie on the beach in Bali. Actually, that gets pretty boring. We're made to work. I can't remember who it was, but I had a student at one point who was a drummer. And they were studying taiko drumming, which is a Japanese music form. And their taiko master says, you need to practice drumming until you can drum like a child. I don't know if you ever did this as children or you ever had like children or nephews or nieces. They pull the pots and pans out of the cupboards and get the spoons and go bang, 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 bang. Did you ever do that? Mm-hmm. Yes? Yeah. That's so much fun, these kids. That's work. But it was joy, it was fun. We have a right to this. But it can take some self-effort to begin to move into this. So here, this deep, deep understanding of Swadharma. Now you can't look at somebody else, oh, I really like what Daniel's doing. He seems to be enjoying it, so maybe I'll do what Daniel's doing. Sorry, he's taken. You can't be Daniel. You can only be you. And that takes self-honesty, authenticity, quiet. We have our friend Anand. You know, he has many, many skills. But you and I know that. What is it that really floats his boat?
Food.
Uh-huh. He loves to cook. He loves to feed people. And he's working on actualizing that. Not easy, because he's no kid. Would his life have been different if, instead of going to college and going into IT and all that sort of stuff, he'd gone to culinary school? Who knows? But what gets in our way is what's going to be a safe job, what's going to make me a lot of money, what's going to bring me status in the society, what are my parents going to approve of? This is all that super ego stuff. There's nothing wrong with it. Let's put that on the shelf. We'll go into it more deeply when we start to study chapters 3, 4, and 5. All right. Any questions so far? Next verse.
Yadrichaya chupapanna swargadwara mapavritam sukhina kshatriya partha labhante yuddha midrusham. Happy indeed are the Kshatriyas, O Partha, who are called to fight in such a battle that comes of itself as an open door to heaven.
So here it doesn't mean if you're a Kshatriya and you're fighting a righteous war, when you get killed, you go to heaven. Doesn't mean that. What it means is when we're riding the current of our intuition, of our swabhava, our swadharma, we begin to enjoy life. Now it's temporary. For 40 years on and off, I was a musician. And then I got old and I retired. You'll know. You'll know. It's what you find yourself doing without a lot of effort. There's a difference between work and struggle, work and making efforts. Again, back to my career as a musician. It would be 10 o'clock at night, and I'd be walking through the music building, Cal State Hayward. And I could peek into the windows of a practice room, and I could see the kids who were practicing, having fun. They were enjoying the craft of being a musician. There were other kids who may have had raw talent, but they were lazy. They'd rather do other things. Probably would not have careers. A lot of work is involved. But that's all we get in this world is work. Might as well enjoy it. Next verse.
अथ चेत्त्वमिमं धर्म्य संग्रामं न करिष्यसि तथा स्वधर्मं कीर्तिं च हित्वा पापमवाप्स्यसि. But if you will not fight this righteous war, then having abandoned your own duty and fame, you shall incur sin.
Yes. So what happens if we do not act according to our swadharma? We accrue papam. Now, we have to take this idea of papam, here translated as sin, outside of the Judeo-Christian notion. There's no rules of God, which if we do them, we get demerits. So for Jews, there's 613 kosher laws. Obey those, and you're a good, righteous Jew. If you don't obey them, you're not righteous. Christians, there are all these sorts of things that make you a good Christian or a good Muslim, stuff like that. Hinduism has them too. But this is not what, as yogis, we want to understand. Let's take a deeper definition of punya, merit, and papa. Here, sin is not my favorite word for it. Any action, gross or subtle, meaning a physical action or a mode of thinking, that purifies my mind, brings me peace and serenity, is punya. Any action, gross or subtle, that grossifies my mind, makes it denser or thicker, is papam. So it's not that he's a kshatriya, and if he tries to meditate, oh, you're going against your caste, bad boy. It doesn't mean that. It means that if he is struggling, he's building more vasana, more sanskaras in the mind. And that will thicken and grossify the mind and make it less fit for sadhana. Any questions about these subtler definitions of punya and papa? Now it can shift. So, for example, if someone is an alcoholic and they decide to get sober and they start to have sugar cravings, go ahead and eat. Oh, I'm getting fat. Don't worry about it. So if your mind's a bit agitated, have a candy bar. Eating the candy is punya, brings you some serenity. It's better than going out and relapsing and getting drunk. Then after they've been sober for a year, oh God, I feel so uncomfortable and dense and gross. I'm uncomfortable in my body and stuff like that. Well, maybe it's time to start paying attention to your diet. What was punya has now become papam. You start your yoga, you've been a meat eater your whole life. Oh, I'm going to give up meat all right at once. And then you spend all your time not thinking about God, but thinking about food. Go ahead and have your piece of chicken and meditate. After a while, you may find, oh, this is, makes me feel gross. You will naturally start to lighten your diet, stuff like that. So it's not absolute. This is the list of everything that's papam. This is the list of everything that's punya. Think of these subtle definitions. If the action, gross or subtle, brings serenity, peace of mind, or tranquility, right here, right now, that's punya, merit. If, on the other hand, it grossifies the mind, makes you feel thick, dull, alienated, anxious, angry, often it's time to start turning away from that. So, if I am acting contrary to my swadharma, life becomes a struggle. It's no fun. I'm thinking of a woman, she, again, studied mathematics, became a bookkeeper because her parents said she needed to find something that was safe. She hates it. That incurs sin, incurs papa. And then what do we do if we're caught in that trap? Well, I want to dull my disquiet. You probably go home and have to have half a bottle of wine at night to deal with how uncomfortable you feel. Spend the night doing scrolling on the device. Whatever you need to do. Any thoughts on this principle about punya and papa? All right, next one.
Oh, I think I did this one. Akirtim chapi bhutani kathayishyanti te vyayam sambhavitasya chakirtim marana datirichyate. People too will recount your everlasting dishonor, and to the one who has been honored, dishonor is more than death.
Yeah. So here Krishna knows intuitively where Krishna's ego is lodged as Kshatriya. Honor, his integrity, his reputation, very important to it. So Pope said, you don't fight, people are going to think you're a coward. You're dishonorable. Another true story. So I was talking with a person who's an introvert, who's deeply spiritual. And when he's in a social situation where there are a lot of big personalities who are funny and they crack jokes and they're quick and they're clever, he always feels terrible about himself because he can't compete. And he leaves with his self-esteem around his ankles. Now, one could say, okay, stay identified with the witness. You are none of these things. But that may not be the best teaching for him when he's that contracted. So you got to give the right teaching at the right time, depending on where a person is. So he happens to be a Catholic. And I said, well, when you're up at the Graduate Theological Union and you're talking with other people and stuff like that, do you feel uncomfortable? No, not at all. When you're around other people who have a spiritual practice, do you feel uncomfortable? No, not at all. And I said, well, maybe you should try an experiment. Why don't you go where you feel comfortable? Maybe the answer is not to become a stand-up comedian at a cocktail party. Maybe the answer is to seek holy company. Hang out with people whose values are similar to your own. Don't go against your nature. This is the same teaching. Maybe you're an introvert at heart, meaning you get your energy talking with one or two people at a time. Maybe being in large crowds depletes your energy. Extroverts get fed in those kinds of environments. They don't like being alone. It's difficult for them. So part of this, you see, was identifying, well, what kind of personality do you have? Why don't you endeavor to be authentic and be true to it, rather than trying to be something you're not at the personality level, and then failing, and then feeling terrible about yourself. Do you understand what I'm saying here? Yes? No?
Yes.
You don't have to be anything, but be authentic. This is why I like to tell people, really don't try to be spiritual. Don't try to be a spiritual person. Strive for authenticity. Strive for authenticity. It's so much less burdensome. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
भयाद्रणादुपुरपरतं मंस्यन्ते त्वां महारथा येषां च त्वं बहु मतो भूत्वा यास्यसि लाघवम्. The great battalion commanders will think that you have withdrawn from the battle through fear, and you will be looked down upon by those who had thought much of you and your heroism in the past.
So here again, Arjuna has been identified as a warrior, a general. And Krishna, knowing where his ego is lodged, is poking. And Every time he does, Arjuna reacts. To see where we are triggered. Now, the great psychiatrist Carl Jung and philosopher used to say, only a healthy ego can die. Ram Dass used to say, you've got to be somebody before you're nobody. So there's a paradox in this work. It is very difficult for a person with real low self-esteem, whose mind is constantly telling them they're no good, they're a worm, they're unlovable, they're broken, they're defective, to go to the highest where you abandon all that stuff. For them, it may be necessary to first build some self-esteem. How do you build self-esteem? You can start by doing esteemable actions. Start by giving up destructive behaviors. Giving up destructive modes of thinking. Turn it to positive modes of thinking. Thought replacement. Well, I thought we were supposed to get rid of all those things. Eventually we do. And you give up even the good vasanas. Here Krishna is saying, Arjuna's not quite ready yet. He's very identified. Here he's saying, you need to be authentic. You need to live true to your self-nature. Swadharma. So for Deepa, the process you went through for the job title, the responsibility, and the raise, that was a great act of self-esteem on your part. Remember when you went through that?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't you feel a lot better about yourself as an individual?
You did.
Yeah. It was important at that point. Now, more subtle forms of yoga, all that has to go. But I suspect it was necessary for you to go through that stage. That making sense?
Yeah.
How do I know where I am and what I need to do? Your intuition will let you know. All right, one more.
Avacha vadam. I don't know why the Sanskrit in this chapter is a little complex. Avacha vadamscha bahun vadishyan. Avacha vadamscha bahun anvadishyanti tavahitaha nindantastav samarthyam tato dukkhataram nukim. In many unspeakable words will your enemies speak, cavilling about your powers. What can be more painful than this?
So if Krishna was saying, if you're not able to do your duty and fight because it's the right thing to do your duty so you don't hate yourself, is what he's saying here. Do esteemable actions is the way to build self-esteem. And there are all sorts of interesting tools we can do to build this. In the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, one of my favorite sutras is the first one in the second chapter. Tapas Swadhyayeshwara Pranidhana Kriya Yoga. Tapas, austerity, swadhyaya, self-examination, self-study. Ishvara Pranidhana, trustful surrender to God, is called yoga in action, Kriya Yoga. The term swadhyaya for us Vedantins usually means when we review scripture on our own. But in the Raja Yoga tradition, it means an honest inventory of my own character assets and my own kleshas, my own afflictions and defilements. Then, tapas, taking up the practice to move the mind away from non-conducive, negative thoughts and actions into more positive ones. And one of the things we begin to see is how hard it is and how powerless we are over so much of it. And that's why we need trustful surrender to God. But here are some tools. First of all, take pen to paper and make a list of your grosser character defects, kleshas, your doshas. Do you have control issues? Do you get caught up in self-pity? Are you caught up in anger? Do you try to look good, be a goody-goody? Do you lie? Do you cut corners with your integrity? Find out. Look. Now, have a trustful friend and share it with them. One of the most painful but valuable acts of abandoning ego is the willingness to not look good in front of another person. Pick a trustful person and keep their mouth shut. Then, if I have hurt or harmed someone, the tradition says, as Ram Dass framed it, be here now, live in the present. It's interesting, what is it that tends to make living in the present hard? One of the biggest is regret for the past. I've said an unkind thing. I've done something for which I'm not proud. I've hurt or harmed another person. We cannot change the past, but you can amend it. You can go to that person and tell them you're sorry, and then behave differently. You borrowed money and never paid it back. Pay back the money. If you took advantage of another person, fess up to it. Do your best to make it right. It's amazing how much weight we carry because of regret for the past. These are powerful tools to help bring the mind into the now. Of course, the other half is not to worry about the future. That's where trustful surrender to God is also helpful. But it's work to do this tapas. The mind has its habituated grooves where it goes, which are non-conducive. And it takes paurusham, self-effort, to move them into more conducive, subhaj, auspicious desires, auspicious actions, modes of thinking and acting. This is a huge part of our sadhana. Any thoughts on this as a simple but very powerful practice? Inventory, sharing it with another person, and then amending where we've hurt or harmed another. Usually it's very devastating to the ego, which is always a good thing. All right, we'll end here. So again, I think let's do our calendaring to make sure today is the 17th. So next Sunday, the 24th, will be our last Gita class of the year. And then we will start up again on Sunday, January 5th. And I'll send this out in an email so everybody has all these dates. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om.